The story of the Napoleonic Wars begins not just with one man, but with a revolution. In 1789, the people of France rose up. They overthrew their king and established a new republic. This event, the French Revolution, sent shockwaves across Europe. The old monarchies, the kings and queens of Austria, Prussia, and Russia looked on with fear. They worried that the revolutionary ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity might spread to their own lands. They feared their own people might follow France's example. This deep-seated anxiety created a continent simmering with tension, ready to boil over into open conflict at any moment. This fear led to a series of wars even before Napoleon took center stage. The other great powers of Europe formed coalitions to fight against revolutionary France. They wanted to crush the new republic and restore the French monarchy. These early conflicts were brutal and redrew the map of Europe. It was during these chaotic times that a young and ambitious Corsican artillery officer began to make a name for himself. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. He showed incredible talent on the battlefield, securing vital victories for France. His strategic genius was unlike anything seen before, and he quickly became a hero to the French people. Napoleon's rise was incredibly swift. He used his military fame to gain political power. In 1799, he staged a coup d'état, a sudden seizure of power, and became the first consul of France. He brought stability to a country that had been torn apart by years of internal turmoil and external threats. He promised order, glory, and an end to the chaos. For many in France, he was the strong leader they had been desperately waiting for. But his ambition did not stop at France's borders. He had a grand vision of a French-dominated Europe, a vision that would inevitably lead to more war. The Napoleonic Wars officially began around 1803. This was when the fragile peace between Britain and France finally shattered. Britain, with its powerful Royal Navy, was Napoleon's most persistent enemy. It controlled the seas and financed many of the continental powers who fought against France. The conflict was a clash of titans, Napoleon's unstoppable army on land against Britain's unbeatable navy at sea. This set the stage for more than a decade of relentless warfare. The ensuing struggle would engulf the entire continent, from the sun-baked plains of Spain to the frozen wastes of Russia, changing Europe forever. Napoleon Bonaparte was more than just a general. He was a military innovator. He perfected a new way of fighting. His armies, the Grande Armée, could move faster and strike harder than any of their rivals. He organized his forces into flexible corps that could march separately and then converge to overwhelm an enemy at a single point. This strategy allowed him to achieve a series of stunning victories that cemented his reputation as a military genius. He was a master of logistics, ensuring his troops were fed and supplied, and a master of morale, inspiring deep loyalty in his soldiers who followed him with unwavering devotion. Between 1805 and 1807, Napoleon reached the peak of his power. He inflicted crushing defeats on the coalition armies of Austria, Prussia, and Russia. The Battle of Austerlitz in 1805 is often called his masterpiece. He tricked the Austrian and Russian emperors into attacking his seemingly weak right flank, only to launch a devastating counterattack on their center, splitting their forces and securing a legendary victory. A year later, at the battles of Jena and Auerstedt, he completely humbled the mighty Prussian army. These victories allowed him to dismantle old institutions, like the 1,000-year-old Holy Roman Empire, and create new client states loyal to him. Napoleon's influence spread across Europe like a flood tide. He placed his relatives and trusted marshals on the thrones of conquered kingdoms. His brother Joseph became king of Spain, and his brother-in-law Joachim Murat became king of Naples. He reorganized Germany into the Confederation of the Rhine and created the Duchy of Warsaw in Poland. He also introduced a set of modern laws known as the Napoleonic Code. This code promoted legal equality, religious toleration, and abolished feudal privileges. While it brought progressive reforms, it was also imposed by a conqueror, and many people resented French domination and the heavy taxes needed to fund Napoleon's wars. Despite his control over the continent, one enemy remained beyond his grasp. Great Britain, protected by the English Channel and the formidable Royal Navy, Britain was safe from invasion. After the French and Spanish navies were decisively defeated at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805, Napoleon knew he could not challenge Britain at sea, so he tried to defeat them economically. He established the Continental System, a large-scale embargo that forbade his allies and conquered territories from trading with Britain. He hoped to cripple the British economy, but the system was difficult to enforce and ultimately caused widespread hardship and smuggling across Europe. Napoleon's long run of success began to falter in two key regions, Spain and Russia. In 1808, he invaded Spain and put his brother on the throne. This sparked a furious national uprising. The Spanish people, aided by British forces under the Duke of Wellington, waged a brutal guerrilla war. This Spanish ulcer, as Napoleon called it, drained his empire of valuable troops and money for years. It was a constant, bleeding wound that he could never fully heal. The relentless hit-and-run tactics of the Spanish fighters showed that even a mighty army could be worn down by a determined population. The fatal blow to Napoleon's empire came in 1812. To enforce his continental system, Napoleon gathered the largest European army ever seen, over 600,000 men, and invaded Russia. The Russians, however, refused to fight a decisive battle. They retreated deeper and deeper into their vast country, burning crops and villages as they went. Napoleon captured a deserted and burning Moscow, but it was a hollow victory. With no supplies and the brutal Russian winter setting in, he was forced into a disastrous retreat. Cold, starvation, and Russian attacks destroyed his Grande Armée. Fewer than 1 in 10 soldiers made it back. The catastrophic Russian campaign shattered the myth of Napoleon's invincibility. Seeing his weakness, the other major powers of Europe, Prussia, Austria, Russia, and Sweden, formed a new and powerful coalition against him. In October 1813, they confronted him at the massive Battle of Leipzig, also known as the Battle of the Nations. For 3 days, over 500,000 soldiers clashed in the largest battle in European history up to that point. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, Napoleon suffered a decisive defeat. This loss forced his armies out of Germany and back towards France, sealing the fate of his empire. The end came swiftly. The Allied armies invaded France in 1814, and despite a series of brilliant defensive battles fought by Napoleon, Paris was captured. He was forced to abdicate his throne and was exiled to the small Mediterranean island of Elba. But his story was not quite over. In March 1815, he escaped from Elba, landed in France, and rallied the nation behind him for one last gamble. This period, known as the 100 Days, culminated in the famous Battle of Waterloo. On June 18, 1815, Napoleon's army was finally and completely defeated by a coalition army led by the Duke of Wellington and Gebhard von Blücher. This time, he was exiled to the remote Atlantic island of St. Helena, where he died in 1821. After Napoleon's final defeat, the leaders of Europe gathered at the Congress of Vienna in 1815. Their main goal was to create a lasting peace and restore stability to the continent. Led by statesmen like Austria's Clemens von Metternich, they redrew the map of Europe. They aimed to create a balance of power, ensuring that no single country could dominate the others as France had done. Old monarchies were restored in France, Spain, and other nations. While they tried to turn back the clock to the pre-revolutionary era, they could not erase the powerful ideas that the wars had unleashed across the continent. The Napoleonic Wars had a profound impact on the idea of the nation. In countries like Germany, Italy, and Spain, fighting against the French invaders helped to forge a new sense of national identity. People who had previously thought of themselves as Prussians, Bavarians, or Sicilians began to see themselves as Germans or Italians. This rise of nationalism was one of the most significant legacies of the era. It would become a powerful force in the 19th and 20th centuries, leading to the unification of Germany and Italy, but also contributing to future conflicts, including the First World War. The wars also brought about significant social and political changes. Napoleon's legal and administrative reforms, such as the Napoleonic Code, were kept in many parts of Europe, even after his fall. These reforms had swept away centuries of feudal tradition, promoting meritocracy and legal equality. Warfare itself was also transformed. The conflict saw the mobilization of huge citizen armies, moving away from the smaller, professional armies of the 18th century. This concept of the nation in arms meant that future wars would be fought on a much larger and more destructive scale, involving entire populations. Today, more than 2 centuries later, the Napoleonic Wars are remembered for good reason. They mark a pivotal turning point between the old world of kings and aristocrats and the modern world of nations and citizens. The period gave us one of history's most compelling figures in Napoleon Bonaparte, a man whose ambition, genius, and flaws shaped the destiny of a continent. The wars he unleashed were a crucible of fire that destroyed an old order and forged a new one. The political boundaries, legal systems, and national identities of modern Europe all bear the indelible marks of this chaotic and transformative period in our shared history.